Hi guys. I just made a video on how do I use my pumps for the Pro Marine supplies, and I'm going to show you, the pumps are over there, so excuse the mess. I'm going to show you sort of how I mix my epoxy. Now I already put my part B in here, that's the thinner part, into my little mixing cup. I haven't put the part A in it. That's the thicker part, and I want to show you why I haven't done that so far. So I find, if you look over here, I'm going to ask my beautiful boy assistant to show you what's in this cup. If you look here, there aren't any bubbles at all. Part B is pretty much bubble free. However, if you look at part A, you'll see there are bubbles. I know that's a big pet peeve. To me, I have a few bubbles in my mix, but it never shows up on my product, and it never, like, I've had such great results. I can't complain, honestly. But I'm going to show you what I do. So what I've been doing to kind of minimize the bubbles. So basically I have an embossing gun. It's so dirty because I'm handling epoxy, and anyway, and it's been abused, I guess you can say. But I use this before I even mix it, just to get out some of the large bubbles. So if you want to look back here, there are some large bubbles and some small bubbles. So if I just take this really quickly, I'll just give it a big shot of heat here, okay? You'll see that most of the large bubbles and most of the other bubbles are pretty much gone, okay? So this is what I do before I even mix. Like, that took me like a few seconds. Then I will go ahead and I'll start the mixing process. So when I mix, I'm usually very careful. I don't whip. I don't, go crazy on it. I take my time. It's, I think it's worth it. A little bit of time ahead of time saves a lot of headache afterwards, I find. So I go ahead, I get every last drop. Okay, that's pretty good. Put my cup here. And then when I mix, I just gently swirl like this, okay? So I swirl, okay? Not too fast and not too slow. And what happens is it starts to get really, really muddy. Like you see it's like streaky and not very clear. So I continue to stir, okay? And I will do this without taking the stick out. If you take your stick out and you put the stick back in, you'll start to get bubbles. So that's one of the little tips that I've learned, mixing this. If you keep that in there, you'll get a better result. You'll get a bubble, less bubbles. So then I will go ahead and I'll, scrape the sides, make sure I get everything good, and then it'll start to get clear, more and more clear. Honestly, you don't have to mix this like, a huge quantity of time. See, I'm starting to get a little bit of bubbles, but they come to the top and then they pop. Sometimes I get more bubbles than other times. Not sure why. This time is pretty good for me. It's not too bad. Now it's starting to become very clear. Like, I can start to see now that the mix has been, the two parts have been pretty incorporated. So I'm starting to be very pleased with this result, okay? All right. Now I'll have you take a quick peek inside. Okay, like this. And you'll see that there are some bubbles. It's not totally bubble free, but you see them popping, eh? So what I'm gonna do, again, heat gun. Just shoot a little bit. Sorry, not heat gun, it's an embossing gun. An embossing gun. But you see, they disappear pretty quickly when you do that. Sorry, I'm gonna go right on there. And I'm not spending an enormous amount of time here doing this. I'm just doing it a little bit. Then I mix a little bit. Oops, sorry. I mix a little bit. Here you go. I'm going to give the camera back to my cinematographer here, my son, Brandon. Okay. And keep popping away and mixing, and it'll get nice and thin too, which is another advantage to doing this. It gets thin and nice. See, I hardly have any bubbles at all. There's a few, but I'm pretty pleased with this. I'm thinking that this is gonna work. Okay, so I'm gonna stop it now because that was my process, my mixing process.